Good afternoon. On behalf of Wartburg College's students, faculty, and staff, I extend a warm welcome to this special ceremony honoring Mr. Shelby Davis. Joining me on the stage today are Daryl Colson, president of Wartburg College, and Mike McCoy, chair of the Board of Regents. Through his generosity as a philanthropist and humanitarian, Mr. Davis has transformed the lives of Wartburg's Davis UWC Scholars by making it possible for them to study on our campus and to discover their life's calling. Since partnering with the Davis UWC Scholars Program in 2007, Wartburg has welcomed 218 students representing 82 countries. 91 scholars from 51 countries are currently enrolled. Mr. Davis has been and continues to be passionately dedicated to promoting international understanding and world peace through education. In addition to opening doors and opportunities for Davis UWC scholars, the program enriches campus life by fostering a diverse and culturally inclusive living and learning environment. Mr. Davis's distinguished career and tireless commitment to service and education embody the Wartburg core values of leadership, service, faith, and learning. President Colson, it is my honor and pleasure to present Mr. Shelby Davis to receive the honorary degree, Doctor of Humane Letters, as recommended and approved by the faculty and Board of Regents of Wartburg College.
Shelby Davis, you are a prominent philanthropist with a deep commitment to fostering international understanding and peace among cultures and nations through education. Your generosity has made it possible for thousands of students to develop the knowledge, skills, sensitivities, and networks that empower them to assume positions of responsibility and leadership to create change around the world. You earned your Bachelor of Arts degree in American History from Princeton University. Your father and mother, whom you describe as a doer and a dreamer, respectively, kindled a passion for business and humanitarian causes. You started your career with the Bank of New York and later founded Davis Advisors, a mutual fund management company. Through your study of history, you learned how leaders make a difference and devoted your personal and financial energies to investing in education for future leaders. Since the late 1990s, you and your family have contributed more than $75 million in scholarship funds to United World Colleges, a group of 18 schools on 4 continents. In 2000, you co-founded the Davis United World College Scholars Program with Dr. Philip Geyer. Your annual contribution of $50 million has supported more than 10,000 scholars at nearly 100 U.S. partner colleges and universities, and helped make this the largest privately funded international scholarship program in the world. Wartburg College is proud to be one of those partner institutions. Davis scholars enrich the college as it strives to develop cultural competence as a dimension of learning and community life, and to support a diverse and culturally inclusive campus environment. Wartburg students also benefit from the generosity of your mother, Catherine, who created and funded the Projects for Peace initiative to mark her 100th birthday. Projects for Peace invites all undergraduates at Davis Scholar institutions to propose grassroots, actionable projects for building peace in the world. Wartburg has been awarded at least one $10,000 project grant each year since the inception of the program in 2007. As a longtime advocate for education, you have served on the boards of Princeton University, United World College USA, the Hoover Institution at Stanford University, and the Teton Science School in Jackson, Wyoming. Shelby Davis, your steadfast devotion to education has transformed students' lives and enhanced the global diversity of American higher education. By virtue of the authority vested in me by the Wartburg College Board of Regents, I hereby confer upon you the degree Doctor of Humane Letters, honoris causa, with all the rights, privileges, and responsibilities pertaining thereto, this 15th day of February in the year 2020.
And your honorary degree and citation. Congratulations.
Wow. Congratulations to you, sir. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Well, I'm a lucky man.
You're a generous man. Please have the microphone for me.
Oh, yeah. Can you hear me now? Okay, good. I'll try to make this pretty brief, but I wanted to thank Wartburg for sure for this. I'm a lucky man to be here. Lucky, I've had luck all my life, and it gives me great pleasure to hear the words that they say about what I've done in international education. Education is one of the major philanthropist destinations. If I had the ability to cure cancer or Alzheimer's, I would invest in that. But I'm an investor, and I know that I can't do that, and I know that what I can do is give kids who have winning habits the ability to get a higher education. And with education comes possibilities. I won't define it any more than that, but obviously if you have an education, you have more possibilities to help the world or be a leader or whatever than if you don't. And I've been extremely lucky all my life to have the parents I had. I can go into it in a minute, but I'm just overwhelmed, frankly, that this has happened, that I now have what people tell me over and over is the world's largest family, 4,000 kids in college as we speak. And it really was an outgrowth of my parents' upbringing to me, which was that you have to have a roadmap for life's journey. And that roadmap they suggested was that the first 30 years of your life, you should focus on learning. That's beyond the college years, in fact. Keep learning. Then the next 30 years, when you're 30 to 60, you focus on your career, on earning, as they would put it, especially my father. And then the last 30 years of your life, if you're lucky and have been fortunate, focus on returning. So learn, earn, return was drummed into my head as a teenager or even earlier. And my father also was a workaholic kind of and an expert in his field in Wall Street in insurance companies. And he told me over and over, the only place you'll find success before work is in the dictionary. And so, if you want to be successful, you've got to work. And my mother, I got my business genes from him. I got my humanitarian genes, I think, more from my mother. I know it's more. She always wanted peace. She always wanted harmony. And she said to me, if you're a success, you will never be known for the amount of money you made, but you might be remembered for what you did with it. So with that roadmap and that instruction from my parents, they really set the stage for what I've been able to do. And I had no idea it would grow like this. The luck I did have visiting a school, the one UWC school in New Mexico, just by chance meeting the president, having him invite me to see these students in action at his school, 200 kids from 70 countries, 100 juniors, 100 seniors. This is a boarding school. Boarding schools are different than international schools. There are a lot of international schools, but not many are boarding. And boarding is where you're away from home and you're really growing up fast because you're in an environment that doesn't have your parents there coaching you, so to speak. So those are the background. My mother and father, and my career in Wall Street was fortunate because I happened to be in the right place at the right time. As an example, my first job was right out of Princeton at the Bank of New York. I was hired and I started work the very next day after graduation. I'd had enough of school. I wanted to see if I could earn some money. But the salary was so low at the bank that I couldn't afford anything but living at home for 2 or 3 years. I lived at home, and I even got my father to subsidize my commuting fees because we lived in Tarrytown, New York, about 20 miles outside of New York. So to get to work, I had to take a train and then the subway down to Wall Street in Lower Manhattan. And I did that. And so that was one of the lucky things because the salary was so low that I was constantly, people above me were leaving for higher salaries. And so I got promoted. And this happened 4 or 5 times. And I eventually became a vice president, they told me, at the age of 28 or something like that. And the next morning in the New York Times, I read, they didn't tell me this, that I was the youngest vice president in the history of the bank since the founder, Alexander Hamilton. I mean, can you believe that luck? and just complete surprise. Well, then I was about 2 or 3 years later, after running the research department, I decided I've learned enough. I'm going to try to get out on my own. And with 2 fellows from Yale, we started an investment advisory company. Then it became a mutual fund company. And I had a huge, we had a very slow start, let's put it that way, in that first 30 years, from 30 to 60. In fact, it was such a slow start. It was steady, but we had no tailwind at all from the stock market. You all, most of you in the room, probably way too young to remember or even care, but the stock market did nothing from that time in 1969. It was around 800. And in 1982, it was still around 800, never breaking 1,000. This is the Dow Jones. And, and my partners got antsy, and they wanted to sell to me about then. And I bought them out, and guess what? Talk about luck. The next 15 years, till I retired, the market went up tenfold, and I owned the whole company. So, this was like, a miracle. And it shows you how perseverance and, beliefs can pay off, but it may take, it's easy to say 15 years, but living through 15 years of a neutral market did not provide a tailwind. And in the last 15, we had an enormous tailwind because we had the most money rolling in the door, because we had a decent record, and the mutual funds were hot. And we got another article. I didn't know about it again, but in 1995, about 3 years before I retired, an article came out in the December issue of Money Magazine. And I was on the cover. I didn't know I was going to be on the cover. And I didn't plan it or anything. And somebody had come and interviewed me, that's all. And it said something I never knew on the cover. Meet Mr. Reliable, the only money manager you'll need, because he has outperformed for the last 10, 15, 20, and 25 years 95% of all mutual funds. So with that article, the December issue, when people are making their plans for the new year, the money started rolling in our door. I mean, and then the market was a tailwind on top of that. So, you know, we added billions of assets under management in 5 years. And in those last 5 or 10 years. And that's when I was about to turn 60, not quite, in 97. Well, yes, it was in 97. And my mother's words spoke to me. She was still alive, and she probably kept repeating them. You'll never be known. So I was looking around for a project in education. My parents had lived near New York. They had PhDs that they got at the University of Geneva. They had met people during the League of Nations was there in the 1930s, during the Depression when I was born. And they, because we lived there in New York when I was at 10 to 20, you know, we had a lot of visitors from all over the world coming to see my parents. And they were nice enough to include me at the dinner table. Or, you know, some people would spend the night at lunch or dinner, whatever. And I met people from all over the world that were their friends from their PhD years at a very international city, Geneva. So I was kind of primed for what happened, but I didn't know it was going to happen again. I meet Phil Geyer on a chairlift. He takes me to the school. I start thinking, hey, this is Americans ought to learn about these countries from people on their campus, the way this school is. And then I went to visit some of the other schools. There were 12 then. There are now 18 schools. And they're called colleges, but that's a British term for boarding school. And so they're United World Schools in our parlance. And I was asking the Americans' roommates who I was funding to go to these schools, I said, well, where are you going to college, to the roommate? And he said, well, I'm from Angola, and I got accepted at Harvard. I said, wow, that's fantastic. You got to go. And he says, well, it's nice. I said, well, they give you a scholarship, right? And I'm talking out of school here, but they said, yes, we got a $1,000 scholarship, and my father makes $1,000 a year. So, of course, I can't go. Well, you know, if you're an entrepreneur and you can find a need and fill it, you do it. That's sort of one definition of a successful entrepreneur. Find a need and fill it. Well, these kids were being dead-ended from 100, you know, at that time, 60 or 80 countries, or maybe more, at these schools that wanted to come to the U.S., not all of them, half of them maybe, and they were getting in, but they weren't getting any funding. And I thought, this is a dead end, you know, this is crazy to have got them this far and not let them do that. So that's how it started, and it grew. The first year we had 40 students at 5 family schools. One was our summer home school, but it was at Princeton, Wellesley, Colby, and Middlebury, Eastern schools where our family had gone. And then it gradually expanded as we kept, after the pilot program, we kept adding schools randomly, and the Ivy League all applied right away, and then all the smaller schools on the East Coast, the Williams and Amherst and so forth, and then it moved to McAllister and all these places on the west, in the Middle West, and it's now in Stanford and all the schools in the Pacific Northwest. So we have 90 universities now. And there was an open invitation, but now we ask them to at least matriculate 2 or 3 on their own before we get involved. But that's just because the paperwork is immense. It's been a home, as I say, my parents set the stage, but my partner in this was and then became the head of the UWC in New Mexico. And he's the PhD in the family, in the group. And, you know, my parents set the stage. We started the program, and Phil Geyer, my partner, has put it on Broadway. I mean, it's become, as I say, the world's largest family in college. And I'm so proud of my partner and able to do this. And that's really my story. And I want to thank Wartburg because I love their school colors. They're mine at Princeton, orange and black. So thank you all for listening. I hope that's enough. I can take questions later, but I could go on, but I'm getting my right hand over there, my wife, for 44 years, and we met 50 years ago when I was starting the firm. So she worked there, and I couldn't have done it without Gail. So she's my right arm, and I'm getting the high sign. Time to quit. Okay, thank you.